5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm John Miglosh for the WDMA and the International Society for Strategic Marketing. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Let's see if I've got anybody live. I see Mr. Arizona. Yes, I know, blank screen. That's because I was combing my hair. For those of you who haven't been here before, we do this every day. We cover the world in a few minutes. Okay? Iron Horse unveils an A/B testing tool, but I didn't realize that this was from December 14th, so it's not news. But I'm just encouraged whenever anybody talks about A/B testing because, in the article, it actually says that most developers just, roll out a new version of something. And the reality is that you can test. And so here's one of the testing tools. There's a lot of testing tools. There's Facebook apps. There's WordPress apps. They can just let you run a brand new. I don't see my streaming working. Let you run a brand new version of something in a controlled way, which is the great way to do it. Okay, there I seem to be moving. Okay, good. So hello world down here. There we go. I need to be an octopus. Okay, the article that I really wanted to get to today was by David Friedman, and he goes into some considerable depth. I highly recommend this article. What will it take for IBM's Watson technology to stop being a dud in healthcare? And this guy, Paul Tang, went to his wife and got a knee replacement or a hip replacement, and he asked, a knee replacement, and he asked his surgeon or her surgeon when he expected her to be back to her normal routine, and he flat out didn't know. And then he goes on to say, or then Tang goes on to say, that if we had Watson, we could deliver that information and know when she's going to get back to work. Now, this is the same kind of joke that we heard in the 80s, that when you get a computer, you'll know all the answers. And I just want to, I've got queued up an article on buzzwords, but this is just typical. And it's infuriating to me because back in the 70s, my brother Ted did a project for Jones Dairy Farm where he was tasked with converting a computer software program called Grade and Yield that evaluated the quality of hogs being slaughtered for Jones Dairy Farm Sausage Company. And what they would do is keep track of every hog by farmer and by buyer. And they would cross-correlate the ability of the farmer to raise, they buy the hogs on the hoof, okay? So the hog weighs 300 pounds, let's say. How much sausage do we get out of that hog? 100 pounds or whatever it is. And that ratio is really important because you're paying by the pound when you buy the hog. So they would keep track of what percentage of yield each farmer produced over time, and they would also keep track of what percentage yield each buyer delivered over time. Okay? Got it? And so over time, their buying of hogs got better and better and better. And the farmers got better, and the buyers got better. Everybody won. But it was built in machine language or Fortran or something, and Ted converted it to Basic 4 on actually no one even knew how it worked. It just came up with numbers, and they knew that a 5 was good and a 3 was bad and a 10 was great or something like that. So when we hear about IBM Watson delivering the kind of information about how long it takes to get back on your feet, someone has to get that data for Watson. It has nothing, let's emphasize this. It has nothing to do with IBM. It has nothing to do with Watson. It has nothing to do with AI. It has to do with keeping the right information. And the problem is we don't know what the right information is. And we haven't been keeping track of that piece of information. And nothing IBM does has anything to do with this process. But just to put it in perspective and why this is so important to understand, much of the press for Watson has been bad. Okay? They quoted $2.4 million to the University of Texas, but after 4 years, it was $40 million. That's the way IBM does projects. You should be fired for hiring IBM. There was a saying in the 70s, nobody ever got fired for hiring IBM. You know what? You probably should be. Okay? Now, Watson learns by continually rejiggering its internal processing routines in order to produce the highest possible percentage of correct answers on some problems. It's not boiled down to grade and yield, although it could be. It could be days to get back on your feet. And doctors could be compared. Orthopedic surgeons could be compared on knee surgeries across the time. You need to think simply, like grade and yield. The correct answers have to already be known. So it's best to work on projects that you know the answer. Okay? Now, here's where it gets interesting. I talked with a guy who'd worked for, I think, 17 years for IBM trying to get Dragon Naturally Speaking working. Okay? Dragon Naturally Speaking was IBM's, and I'm trying to get this so you can see the edge, but I don't see how to do it. Okay, I was trying to get Dragon Naturally Speaking to work. And what they used to use is they used to use training sets. And they'd have you read a page or two of data and try to figure out your voice. And it didn't work at all. It was terrible. I tried over and over and over. You had to be so careful with the way you spoke. It was nothing like naturally speaking. So I talked with a guy who worked on it for 17 years. Guess what? If you're teaching a self-driving car, anyone can label a tree or a sign. But a specialized domain like medicine, and that stumbling block emerges in every domain, you might need experts trained for decades to properly label the information. It's a little like recommending products. Everybody thinks you can get a computer to figure out what I'm going to want next. No, you can't. I don't know what I want next. You don't know what you want next. Okay? So let's get our heads out of the sand and quit thinking that we can make a computer that's going to guess things that can't be guessed just because we have powerful computers. They're not powerful. You got more processor in your eye than in one of these AI magic machines. But anyway, that's another issue. Okay, Watson needs to find correlations between what it reads in health records and what Tang calls all the social determinants of health. Yeah, that's one approach. You can try to get every variable you never thought of and try to figure out what correlates. And you know what's going to happen? Spurious correlations. You're going to find the nuttiest stuff you've ever seen. And I talked about that the other day. Go to spuriouscorrelations.com. The bigger the data set, the more certain the spurious correlations are. It's an absolute mathematical fact. The more data you have, the more silly you're going to get out of the computer. And you're going to kill that Watson. It's just like Google, trying to search on Google. Most of the stuff you get is silly, right? And it's getting bigger and bigger. Now, could Google pare down and say, I just want results from the last 12 months? Sure. Do they give you that as a default? No. So most of what I get out of Google is garbage. It's getting worse and worse. And I don't know why Google doesn't get it. But here's some more crazy. Why should we focus only on making sure we've done as good a job as possible with patients who break a hip? Because it's straightforward. You can count the days. That's how it works. Okay? That's what you need to think like. Think about, we can quantify the quality of life after the surgery by the number of days of recovery and by how well you can rate your performance after the surgery. My hip surgery was kind of a disaster. I had one bad hip. Now I got two bad knees and another bad hip. It was a disaster. Okay? I can rate that. Can I rate one? We could try to predict which patients are at risk for falls and help them not break the hip at all. Yeah, my son broke his ankle last week on the ice. Was he in the at-risk category? Probably not. He's going to have surgery on his ankle. You're so full of baloney. Now, here's the great part. Google's sister company trying to get data directly from the patients itself. You know how they solved natural language? Did IBM solve it? No. What happened was Google kept track of when you said something into the phone and corrected it. Did Google know the right answers? No, it knew the wrong answers. Tesla, you know how Tesla built their self-driving car? They loaded the car up with sensors, and they didn't try to drive the car. They tried to understand how people drive the car. Totally the opposite. That's why when we do AI and we do predictive modeling, instead of trying to predict who's going to buy, we predict who's probably not going to buy. It's a lot easier. Okay? You got to think. You got to think straight. You got to think simple. And this stuff is so stupid. Anyway, Google's going to figure it out because they got 10,000 volunteers. Scott Adams says we should reduce your health care costs, a little like the little driving plug you put into your car's data port. It can tell how many times you slam on the brakes. It can tell how fast you turn the car and how crazy you drive. Okay? So we give you a monitor, an app that figures out how much you smoke and how much you exercise, and just pulls it in. And it will give you a big discount on your health insurance, or give you free health care if you put that together. That's the way it's going to get solved. It's not going to get solved by IBM Watson, because no matter how big a computer it is, it's only as good as your data. I'm John Miglosh.